The Nigerian oil and gas industry presents a significant but largely untapped potential for investment. It has huge energy resources and large domestic and regional markets yearning to be served. Notwithstanding its vast potential, the oil and gas industry is still faced with myriads of challenges such as government monopoly, the petroleum industry bill yet to be passed, where we are promised that will be passed before the end of the month, bureaucratic bottlenecks amongst others. With the challenge of lack of sufficient infrastructure to run the oil and gas industry, experts are of the view that the government needs to fast-track the monetization of nation's gas resources, instituting a gas-based industrialization, and increase the generation capacity of the power sector to ensure sustainable electricity delivery for domestic and industrial uses. I introduced him earlier. He's an expert in the field. He's been there as a partner and a consultant, Bloomfield Law Practice, Dr. Ayodele Oni. Thank you very much for your time. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, the oil and gas industry is so big that I really don't know where to start from.
Yes.
That's the main source of revenue for our country.
Yes, it is.
But let's do an overview. What do you make of what we've had and present efforts by this administration to change some of the normals or the norms that used to be on ground, trying to rearrange and reproject? What's your assessment of the sector in its entirety?
What I'll say is it's one of wasted opportunities. If you go elsewhere in the world where they've got large hydrocarbons, you see a lot of development. If you go to Calgary in Canada, if you go to Qatar, if you go to even Dubai, you see a lot done with oil and gas. And then you develop other industries that can now generate revenue. Once you do not add value to your oil and gas, you only become a draw of water and you are wood. Usually, it will affect your balance of trade and balance of payment because you generate revenue from selling crude oil, for example, say $1 billion. Then you now buy back finished products for $1.2 billion, meaning that you've even lost $200 million because we've not developed processing, we've not developed value-adding aspects, infrastructure, refineries. So it's not sufficient that you have resources. It doesn't even guarantee you security of energy supply, because that's just the base resources. For example, you can't put crude oil in your vehicle. You need to refine to have PMS, or what people call petrol, colloquially. Yes. So I think it's one of wasted opportunities, one of lost opportunities, generally speaking, and that's the truth. We've had a lot of pollution, and in exchange, we should have development. But I see this government doing quite a bit, to be honest, in terms of infrastructure. See the AKK, see the integration of the Eastern and Western network for gas. Because for a very long time, we had two broad gas networks. You had the ALPS, Escravos Lagos, which is also known as the Western Pipeline Network, and you had the Eastern. It wasn't even integrated. You couldn't move from one end to the other. But now you've got things. From the policy point of view and regulation, you've got the Gas Transportation Network Code to ensure ease of access for everyone, uniformity of pricing. You've also got infrastructure. We've not had fuel queues for a long time, and then we had one temporarily. It's because some of these things have been done. And concepts like the direct sale, direct purchase concept being used by the NNPC. So it's a combination of having the resources and also adding value or building or developing infrastructure that will add value, that would move the gas from one point to the other. There are a lot of industries in Kano. You'll be shocked that a lot of factories, if you go to the west, if you go to Abia State, go to Onitsha, electricity is always a problem. You go to places. I was speaking to someone who was trying to get a transcript from one of the Nigerian universities. I understand they've not had electricity for 3 months. They owe one of the electricity distribution companies over 22 million naira. So those are issues you have, and you're asking yourself, what's the way forward? It's not enough that we have that resource. We need to be able to add value, and we've lost that opportunity. Oil prices, well, they've been on the rebound.
I tell you, Western Intermediate 71 now.
Western Texas Intermediate,
looking Brent very good. And that's the same way the price of PMS would also continue to be on the high side, and we continue to pay that subsidy. Let's go to that hot topic, subsidy, before we move on. That has been a contending issue. We've been on this for like God knows when. I, as a presenter, I'm even getting tired of talking about subsidy issues because we keep on going round and round. Now, in clear terms, the NNPC have come out to say, fuck, we don't have a dime to remit to you, we have to pay subsidies. We're doing more than 100 billion or something. How do we phantom this into what is on ground? What is your take on the subsidy regime?
Okay, it's interesting. I'll tell you what it is. There is the expected open market price for crude, your landing cost, a margin, and all of that. But government believes, historically, government has believed that the average person cannot pay that expected open market price. So there would be predetermined by PPRA and those entities what that price will be, what people should pay, and government pays the difference. Because, like you said, as prices go up, crude prices go up, you refine and bring it in. PMS, the final product, too, should go up. But as long as there's a gap in what people are supposed to pay and the actual market price, someone needs to pay that difference. Or else I wouldn't do business. If it takes me 3 naira to produce something and you force me to sell it for 1 naira, someone has to give me that difference. Yeah. So really, that's what subsidy has been. And the truth is there have been various debates. Now, I think part of the problems we've had in the country is that people elevate politics ahead of policy. If certain decisions need to be taken, then they have to be taken, regardless of what you think about the next elections. I think that's been a problem in this part of the world. Also, from a social safety net point of view, government believes that, we have oil, our people don't enjoy any other benefit from this oil. Let them enjoy from subsidy. So there are many arguments. Another argument, almost everywhere you go, people run generators. I would understand. So if you look at it from the average man's point of view, the point is you want me to pay a lot for fuel, but I'm obliged to buy fuel every day. Once electricity improves, certain things improve, then there's no obligation to always buy. The poor barber needs to buy fuel. He will run his plant, and some businesses close after. I think in just a short period we spent 10 trillion on just subsidy.
On subsidy,
just subsidy. So the truth is that as long as there's subsidy, government monies, funds that's supposed to go into other things, you end up using to pay subsidy.
So are you one of those that believe that it's really not sustainable?
I don't think it's sustainable. It's definitely not sustainable. I'd rather those funds, those sums are used, channel to social safety nets. Social safety, I mean, everywhere else in the world, if you don't have a job for up to 6 months, you get paid. You don't have a system where you do direct debits. Part of our problems beyond oil and gas also is that we don't even have records. If I do have records with the BVN, with the NIN, you can pay monies directly into people's accounts. You can track, you can do many things. So I'd rather those funds are channeled into providing social safety nets. If I want to have 5 cars and 4 jeeps, it's because I can afford it. If I can't, then I wouldn't.
It's really interesting. If I stay with the regulation, we won't talk about something else today, because it's something that is, it touches me, and I believe that we need to just get a headway when it comes to this. Many talk about Dangote refinery, that we expect that to be functional. We've also devoted $1.5 billion to rehabilitate Port Harcourt refinery, which that's also on ground. You see, how well do you see? Let's talk refining a little. What do you see about the state of our refineries? 4 of them, we know what happened to it. Now, 1.5 billion is there for it. And we're also looking for stake in NNPC. Dangote, I beg your pardon. 20% NNPC wants to get a stake. What are your reactions to this?
Okay, getting a stake, I think that's more security of national security and security of supply. 2 things. You don't want someone, just an individual, a private individual, to have such control. It means if there's a challenge, you can shut off. You'd be in trouble. Because what government is increasingly looking to do now is to ensure that it gets our crude locally and then is able to refine. Now, some of the monies we spent originally importing petroleum products. I know the concept of direct sale, direct purchase, which NNPC has resolved some of that problem, but we still do need that. So 1, in terms of acquiring interest in Dangote, it's for those 2 reasons: national security and security of energy supply. 2. Now, with respect to the state of refineries, it's sad. Many of the problems we have today are historical. They didn't start today. So it might be difficult to resolve them today. But let's see steps being taken. Now, in terms of the refineries and spending that much, I believe to the extent that the monies go directly to the engineering companies, and you can ensure that there's no corruption, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's easier to condemn, but building a new refinery, I mean, people have argued that maybe it's the same amount to build a new refinery. It may not necessarily be. So as long as, the problem we have in Nigeria is we should have sufficient checks and balances, tracking mechanism. Let there be, if there's an offense, there should be a clear punishment. It should be certain, and it should be fair. Certain in the sense that even if it's a naira, ensure that whether you're a politician, whether you belong to any of the political parties, that yes, you pay. So that's one thing. Otherwise, yes, it's easy to say it's corrupt, and it may well be, but I mean, it's arguable. But to the extent that there's a tracking mechanism where you ensure that monies go to the right person, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because we just need that security of supply.
We really do. I think I need to tell Nigerians that you're also an author. So, you know, he's been doing a lot of books, understanding petroleum transactions, Nigeria electricity market, and Nigeria electricity power 2013. I went through all of your data to get more about you, Dr. Oni. But Dr. Oni, I'd like to take you now to that segment that's talking about the energy, the power market, that's the electricity market. We know what happened with privatization, and even as we speak, we are still doing about 4,000, 4,500. At times we are down, 20 plants down, so plants are down. And I spoke to the essay to the president on infrastructure and all of that. I think the secretary to the power, and he was trying to tell me that it's better than what we used to have. Let's also do an assessment of the electricity industry. Do you think that process was well carried out? And can't we do better than this?
Okay, well, in hindsight, you'd always think about it again. I don't think it was a bad idea. I think it was a brilliant idea. Implementation was reasonably good, but there were a few challenges. One, government didn't keep some of its promises. One of those promises...
The investors didn't too.
Yes, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, but the reason, the issue with the investors is they always latched on government.
Yeah, of course.
Government said transmission was going to improve substantially. Government made a number of promises, which they said they didn't keep. But yes, you're right, particularly with the distribution companies.
Exactly.
People always say there's a lot of indiscipline. To be honest, it's also true. Now, it's not just that. You also look at the regulator. Many people now argue that the regulator is a toothless bulldog. Would say, we will do this, and they never do it. So everyone just goes around saying, we'll do whatever we want. Another thing with the regulator is that people have argued regulatory capture, that a lot of the private sector guys have been able to sort of capture the regulator. So it's several things. Even you and I may be at fault. You know, the average consumer wants to take electricity and not pay. And what I say to people is that electricity starts from the value chain, it's down up. If you and I and factories and industries do not pay the distribution companies cannot pay the generation companies who need to pay for gas. They do not pay the market operator, NBED doesn't get its monies. Now, those who have borrowed monies from the banks. Now, many banks at some point appear to have reached, under the prudential rules of the CBN, they had reached their single obligor limits to the power sector. So it was even difficult to get additional funding when many of those loans weren't even performing loans. So, you know, the sector is not just one problem. It's many problems. From consumers not wanting to pay to not having right tariffs for a very long time, so that, well, they said the concept was sculpting. You under-recover initially and over-recover, but you might not even be in existence by the time they want you to over-recover. So that's the problem with the sector. It's multi-layered. So you need to, for me, I don't think there's anything wrong with generation. Once you solve the distribution bit and transmission largely, you'd have, then you can decentralize. Decentralization, where you have solar plants, solar panels, PV plants, you know. So you can decentralize and have distributive generation, is what I wanted to say, or distributed generation, where you have standalone or you have estates. But the truth is that on economies of scale, transmission is still the cheapest. It still gets more expensive when you have a cluster of people compared to when you do transmission. But that might be the way to go. Having a number of maybe residential premises have their own solar panels and even sell excess to the distribution companies, because there's a base load. There's when you are not at home and you have only your fridges on. And when you are back at night, you have much more on. During the day, you can sell your excess to the distribution companies and you get paid. That's what they do elsewhere in the world. So it's multi-layered. If pricing is right, if you and I pay, if government can't keep its promise around the transmission, and there were a number, about 48 transmission projects a few years ago. So government is working. Now the problem is, for a long time, oil prices, we've had issues. The revenues were generating aren't quite what they used to be when it was 100 plus. So government doesn't even have enough to do some of those things. Now, when you talk about investing in transmission, it's one, capital intensive, and the period for your returns, they say it's crazy. That's why you seldom see private sector comes to invest completely. You might have management contracts and all of that. Also, national security issues. If you get a private sector guy to own the entire transmission network, if he has problems with government, he disconnects. Or, so it's hydra-headed, but we'll begin to solve them one by one. It used to be gas. Now gas is there's much improvement.
To talk about that now.
Yes.
Gas.
Yes, the decade of gas.
Decade of gas.
Yes.
So what more? What positives do you see falling out of this decade of gas and all of the moves by the minister, the NNPC?
Okay.
And
I think that's one of the best moves. Now I'm one of those. I'm quite pro-Trump when it comes to energy policy. I'm anti what the Western world says around net zero emissions. Yeah, it does make sense. But the US developed using coal. They still emit 4 times. China, they still emit 4 times what the most industrialized countries in Africa emit. And yet you want us all to decarbonize. We have a lot of gas. Qatar has left OPEC and is concentrating on gas and LNG. We should do similar. We should act similarly. We should invest in our gas, which is why government has said the decade of gas. And even for the average person, the opportunities. More and more people begin to use cooking gas. You can have a cooking gas skid. So there are opportunities for everyone, from the small retailer and gas-driven economic growth. We can use gas to power our cars, power generators. We can sell gas internationally and make money. Yeah, so it's cleaner than crude.
Yeah, true.
So already it's a transition fuel. We're moving towards decarbonization, but I think we should do it more slowly. Let's do it at our own pace. It doesn't mean we should take it into consideration, but maybe we should invest more in carbon capture, sequestration, all of those, carbon storage, rather than jump with the world. So, yeah, we manage both renewables on one side, also because we are blessed in this country. Our solar potentials are enormous. You understand? Yes, I wouldn't go the way of nuclear, because if you have a nuclear accident like Fukushima or Chernobyl, we'll be in trouble, because our disaster management response, emergency response isn't great. But solar, wind, in some parts, you go to Atlantic, you can do wind. So those opportunities are there. It's just one, marketing discipline. 2, the market structure. 3, you and I, we need to pay. 4, government needs to do work on transmission. And pricing just needs to be responsible. And the distribution, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, the regulator needs to actually regulate and do it properly.
Let's wrap up on this note. What are your projections? We see activities picking up globally. Demand for crude is now on the high side. Well, prices are also looking very good. What more do you see as we move on in 2021?
Well, I don't think oil price. I think the oil prices will be sustained, because I don't see it's demand. It's demand driven. I don't see problems in Saudi or Iran that have driven up the price. Usually, at times, market sensitive information does drive up that price. But it looks like a natural projection. Demand is coming back. And I said to everyone, oil isn't going anywhere so soon. It isn't. Over 90% of cars in Africa are internal combustion engine. So if we can concentrate on the sub-region to a limited extent, look at Australia, I see that. I believe it will be sustained. If it goes down, it will be in the $60 range. It may never get to $100 again for a long time. But who knows? Western Texas Intermediate is about $71 now. Brent is 72. Even Bonnie Light is 71, 70 plus. So I think it's a good time for us. Also because if you look at our budget, the benchmark was much lesser than that. Yeah. So there's that margin. So I think there are opportunities, particularly if we concentrate on our gas and we can drive industrialization with gas. Whether you are a retailer, you can do LPG. Whether you're more advanced, you can convert vehicles. You could do LPG, CNG. There's a lot you can do with gas. So I think there are opportunities, enormous opportunities, and gas to power too. We need power. The gap is a lot. If the rule of thumb is 1 megawatt for 1,000 people, you can imagine the volume of electricity we need.
Dr.
Thank you very
Ayodele, we'll keep a tab on you. Would always want you to join us, either you are in or out, to analyze issues in the sector. Energy lawyer, consultant, and is also an author. Dr. Ayodele Oni, partner at Bloomfield Law Practice. Thank you very much for joining us. This is the first time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Show, but we appreciate this.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, then.